government programs because of the confusion it has brought. And it is heading, a lot of effort is being made to divide Jubilee using this BBI and Handshake.
I find it unfortunate that in the process of unifying Kenyans, people feel like they're being left out. And that is why I even said in my statement today, let us use this opportunity to talk with each other, not at each other.
Visas were being cancelled. So what gave birth to the handshake, in my view, was actually more of personal survival rather than patriotism.
The handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga extinguished political fires, spelling a new dawn in Kenyan politics after a repeat of the presidential election in October 2017. The two leaders did this to ensure that never again would the country fight because of politics. The aftermath of the handshake has been tremendous: peace, tranquility, and easier management of the country. But on the flip side, it appears to have driven a wedge between the two highest-ranking principals in the land. And while at it seems to have killed the opposition, or rather, those in opposition are in government and those inside are out. 2 years down the line, we audit the good, the bad, and outright ugly side, if there's any, of the handshake, and imploring if Kenyans have indeed felt the benefit of the handshake celebrated the world over. Good evening, my name is Jesse Rogers. Welcome to The Big Story. So a lot of talk has gone on ever since that March 2018 handshake. Others saying it killed the competition in politics, others saying it's more about cooperation in politics right now. We delve to find out whether indeed it's truly doing sense and justice in the political landscape and to Kenyans as well. Joining me in studio to help me break down this particular talking point is Kipruto Arab Kirwa, who once served as a minister in the Ministry of Agriculture. Thank you so much for making time, gentlemen. And Dr. Churchill Saoke, who is a governance expert. We'll get to deliberate a little bit later, and I'll get to hear your take on this particular matter. Let's just bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, right now. She's set to have a discussion with Paul Mwangi, who's a joint secretary of the Building Bridges Initiative Committee. They get the chance to go round picking up what Kenyans have to say about the BBI and what proposals Kenyans have. It will be interesting to get his point on what exactly he sees as the aftermath of the handshake. Over to you, Sophia.
Hello, Jesse. So it's on this day 2 years ago that President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga shook hands at the steps of Harambee House. A surprise to Kenyans at the time. Former foes, a hotly contested election. You remember in 2017 that saw the initial election annulled by the Supreme Court. In the repeat election, Odinga chose not to participate in the same. However, that turning point on the 9th of March 2018, seeing the two come together, decide to work together to heal the wounds in the country, and what they described as building bridges with a 9-point agenda that subsequently saw a team appointed, the Building Bridges Initiative team, and now a steering committee. Even as it continues with its work, going around the country, collecting views. We saw the launch at the Bomas of Kenya just a few months ago of that report that Kenyans have been encouraged to read and, of course, give their feedback. Now that team has embarked on what they're calling a validation process, so that the views that were given to Kenyans, are they comfortable? Are they agreeable? If not, what are the issues? What else can be added or subtracted, if you like, from this process? However, with all of that happening, one cannot wish away or sideline the issues that also continue to emerge around the BBI, and that is the new battleground it appears to have created with the Deputy President William Ruto and his allies, constantly a back and forth between the two parties. And the question has been, are bridges being burnt or are they being built? And what does this portend going forward? This, as even part of the political class, says that sometime this year we will be going to a referendum on these issues. So to discuss more on where we have come from, how far we've come, and perhaps what to expect going forward, I have with me Paul Mwangi. He is Joint Secretary of the Steering Committee, BBI. Thank you for making time for the big story this evening. Let's begin with your thoughts. You were there 2 years ago, here we are. Did you think this would have taken the trajectory and direction it has to this point, or has it somehow been one of those you played by the ear for the two principles, for the country as well?
Largely, it has fulfilled exactly what was intended in terms of bringing tranquility and harmony in the conduct of national affairs and in the political field. And that was something that was aimed for, and I don't think that has been disrupted. What was not expected is some of the political discourse that has happened in the sidelines and the accusations that have been exchanged about BBI dividing people. It's not that serious to me. I don't take it to be something that is actually true in terms of causing those divisions. I think they're pretty superficial. People are having their own wars and just dragging BBI into it.
Okay, because to the point you make about tranquility, there are those who would contest that statement and say it hasn't created that tranquility, that it's because today is not an election, but if Kenyans with this kind of climate and environment we are in were to go to a poll like we went in 2017, which saw what happened thereafter leading to the handshake, it would perhaps be the same disastrous situation. So would you say that BBI has achieved what was intended if it has opened a new battleground?
BBI has not opened the battleground, and I'm saying that BBI is just being dragged into political battles that were otherwise going to take place. There is nothing about what we proposed in the report that has divided people. Previously, there were suspicions that we were going to play a political game and that we were going to be politically partisan in the things that we proposed, and it came to pass that that was not it. Despite the fact that we have proved ourselves in giving Kenyans something that is largely acceptable to everybody, those divisions are still playing out. Now the new suspicion still, despite the fact that we have presented a report that was agreeable to everybody, there are now still accusations that we are going to pull from the heart, so to speak, a different report. And that has been there before also. We had numerous fake BBI reports that had come out before we issued ours. So the same things are coming back, the same suspicions, the same accusations, and that is why I'm saying that nothing that is happening is about BBI. People are having their own political competition and they're having their own political wars, but BBI keeps getting dragged into it.
Yeah, some would argue perhaps it's because the politicians are seen to have almost taken over the agenda, or at least are leading the agenda, as opposed to you as a steering committee conducting the hearings as we saw initially. So at the rallies, there are those who've argued this are now almost like a campaign strategy for one camp, and that is why when they're not seen to be serious, if you like, efforts to bring in the other parties into the fold, then it's seen the politicization of it becomes ever more prominent. So do you see to that extent that the politicians, especially in playing a role at this time, does not help your agenda?
First, politically we are currently the only game in town. So this is where everybody is going to fight. People want to start their campaigns early. And they need a reason.
And even use the BBI?
That's what I'm saying. They're using BBI as a platform in which to engage in a political war, which they want to have. There are parts of it that we cannot escape the politicians anymore. We have issued the report. We are not going to pass it, and we are not going to pass any of the recommendations that we are going to come up with. So at some point, it's going to have to become political. We have to sell ourselves to the politicians. We have to make sure the politicians understand. Because finally, when we release everything, they're the ones who have to take it. They're the ones who take it to Parliament, take it to the people, campaign among the people. So we cannot divorce ourselves from politicians anymore. And therefore, when they come in and start engaging in this process, we can't rule them out and tell them that they have to. They can't. There's nothing for them to wait for. We have already given the proposals. Yeah. So it is a question how they themselves conduct themselves. Which we have no control over. But the only thing we decry is the fact that they are using our platform to engage in their own wars. Yeah. That I don't think that is fair to Kenyans.
But what then do you say to those who argue there need to be a bigger, better effort to ensure, especially the kind of animosity and the politics we see between the Deputy President and the former Prime Minister, that those people from the Deputy President's camp are feeling welcome in terms of participating. Yes, they were told everyone can come, but then again, you hear from one BBI rally, Governor Ngilu saying, chase that one out, then from another one saying, no, they're not welcome here because they're bad-mannered people. So at the end of the day, I still go back to that point because it was in essence a containment strategy, the handshake, from following the 2017 election. So if we went to an election tomorrow, with all the work that you and the other members of the steering committee have done, wouldn't we end up in the same place today if we were to go to an election?
Let me speak about the rallies that have taken place, because the rallies have been organized by the governors of each of those areas. And let me specifically talk about Meru, because it's one of those that I attended. The Meru rally was organized by the Meru County. The host was Governor of Meru, and it was also co-organized by a group of other, so to speak, Central Kenya counties. And the co-hosts from that side of the fence was Governor Kimemia. And that also played out in the Master of Ceremonies. The Master of Ceremonies for the Meru Rally was Sambi Lui, who was coming from Meru County, and on the other side was Kanini Kega, who was coming from the central counties. They're the ones who determined everything. They're the ones who determined who spoke, who was invited, and people did come and speak and invited, including, as you say, people who were from the political divide of the deputy president. But despite that, the accusations that still come through today are accusations against the former prime minister. So, despite the fact that he was not a host, and neither did he have anything to do with the organization. So, as I say, people are using the BBI platform to engage in their own wars.
Is there no way of ensuring it's not used? You've described it as the process being used. Is there no way to insulate it? Are you saying that then we put our hands down, let this thing take the route it may take, even if it leads us to another bloodshed?
No, we I think one of the things that we also must trust on is the fact that Kenyans will be able to hold themselves and not be dragged into it, and we have to trust that they will do that, because at the end of the day, you can't hold people's mouths. And you can't tie their hands. People will still act. They have the freedom to. People will still speak as they have the freedom to. It's a question of how Kenyans respond to that. And so long as Kenyans know and trust, have faith that the BBI committee will deliver as fairly and as honorably as it did when it did the report, then they should trust that despite everything that they are seeing playing out, that we shall fulfill our mandate and we shall fulfill it honorably.
So when we hear that there will be a referendum by June this year, is that a sentiment you share and something you tell Kenyans to await?
Once we validate our proposals and hand it over to the politicians, the matter is off our hands, totally. So whoever determines the timetable for the referendum will be the politicians. They're the ones who have to pass it through parliament, through the county assemblies. They're the ones to provide for the money.
Are they not jumping the gun talking about it now? We're yet to be done with what the validation process.
Again, we can't tell politicians to keep quiet. They will speak. So it's up to us to say, let the politicians speak because they have to. That's what they do. It's how we respond to it. And at BBI, what we have done is to say we are going to ignore everything that is happening around us. We have a mandate to fulfill, and we want to concentrate on delivering on that mandate. Yeah. Once we do that, we hand it back to those who put us together, and they know where to take that. But at that point, the politicians will also start playing their game. And I think Kenyans should also be able to look and make decisions on what is happening around them, without necessarily being, say, you're being incited into any particular viewpoint or for or against any person.
So, help us understand, in this validation process, can Kenyans, as they bring in their views about the report, bring in issues and suggestions and proposals outside what already you had in the report, or is it limited to what the report contains already? Or is that door closed, or it's still open?
In terms of going out now to come with something entirely new, that door in many ways is largely closed, but new things could come and make us calibrate what we had proposed before. So we may have dealt with one issue, and dealt with it from a particular perspective. But because of something new that has been raised, we might want to go back and calibrate a proposal that we had made, or recommendation that we had forwarded. So yes, new things would be important insofar as they might inform us into either confirming or revising decisions that we had made before.
Yeah. And yet there's the issue of the copies of the BBI report that were promised to Kenyans, and it's been what? When was it, Bomas of Kenya, the launch? Was it 2 months now? I forget the date, but we still don't have those reports circulating around the country.
They are there. They are circulating. It's become a cliche that there are no copies of the reports, but you won't see it because you would have to print about 5 million copies for it to pass through in a way you can see one. So we have to be careful where we take them because they're financial considerations. We do deliver them to all the meetings that where meetings are held. We do deliver abridged copies and printouts, which have the highlights of the report. So in very many different ways, we make sure that people know what is in the report. However, this is going to be a long process, and thinking about finances is important. We will end up with bills that have to be printed, and those will have to be very, very widely circulated. So one has to have an eye that you will need to print many more bills than you will need to print reports.
Okay. So finally, in your view, this process, is it the silver bullet to the issues you seek to address, the 9-point agenda in Kenya? Because there's been an argument that at the end of the day, all of those issues with the current constitution, with proper political will and all hands on deck, they would have been sorted out. That this is just another campaign tool or another process that has political considerations and interests at heart, and not really what Kenyans need and worked on today. So that, is this, in your view, that thing that sorts out all our problems, BBI?
Actually, in your question lies the answer. That yes, all the solutions are there. We have passed reports ever since independence. We have passed laws. How come they are never implemented? And that was a question that was asked when BBI was put up, to go and find out what is it that makes it impossible for us to come together to implement the solutions that are there. And sometimes the laws that are bad, they are not workable. That we have seen with, for instance, the gender rule. The fact that it is provided for in the Constitution, but no implementation mechanism was ever put in place. So, and that is something we are able to come and say that the problem here is that there has been no implementation mechanism, and we will propose that implementation mechanism. Others have just been about politics, that it is impossible to do some things because of the people are divided politically, and there's been grandstanding, and in such things we have proposed particular policies and particular administrative measures that can take care of that.
So this is it for you?
To me, this is it, and I really do hope that we don't miss this, because I don't think we are going to get another chance like this where we have such a commonality in terms of political interests into pushing some things through.
Yeah, and I said finally, but briefly, would you say President Kenyatta needs to attend these political rallies, or rather these BBI rallies, as well as his deputy president, to give it that sense of coming together for whatever the issues that have been outlined?
Well, the former Prime Minister has explained and said that the President has things to do, and he does. He has a country to run. It would be not good if every other time he has to keep attending to a process that can also be supervised by the former Prime Minister. The two of them brought this together, and it exists because they thought about it, and they're the two principles around it. And people should respect the fact that the former Prime Minister is one of the people who gave birth to this process.
And the DP?
Well, it is open, and I wouldn't speak for him or for any of members of his political camp, but I have not seen any restriction to any person to attend it. I was in Meru, and I do remember Senator Murkomen coming and having a full speech, a very long one, in fact. And I did not see any problem, so I don't think there would be a problem if the Deputy President wanted to attend any of the meetings.
All right. Thank you very much for making time for us. Paul Mwangi is Joint Secretary at the BBI steering committee, and so their work continues, sessions with various groups coming to submit their views on the BBI report, the validation process. So one we're going to be watching and covering closely, definitely in coming days, and seeing how these rallies play out. And of course, after the process, what then? That is a matter of time. We'll wait to see. Jesse.
Oh, many thanks, lead reporter Sophia Wanuna right there. Quite interesting. So apparently there are BBI copies and they're usually distributed before each and every meeting. Well, we'll definitely delve deeper into that. But according to Paul Mwangi, they do have a mandate to fulfill at the BBI. Yes, was orchestrated by the two leaders, Uhuru Kenyatta, President, and ODM leader Raila Odinga. But is it really the silver bullet in this 9 thematic areas? Let's start on that note. Over to you, Kipruto Arab Kirwa. Allow me to start with you. So, a lot has happened in the course of the 2 years. The fruits of the handshake, both good and bad. Peace, tranquility, and on the other side, others might say that the Kieleweke, the Tanga factions are all fruits of the handshake. So my question, and I dare ask, are we more divided today than we were before the handshake? Because some might argue what's lacking right now is simply tear gas.
Well, thank you so much for giving me a chance to be here this evening. First of all, many of us don't have any problem with the content of BBI report. What we have a problem is the style and the manner in which it has now been steered into creating two camps, those for us and those who are against us. How we became us and them is a matter that we need to engage and interrogate as a people of this country. Each and every Kenyan has a right to make his opinion clearly known. The way it is, and this is something I can say with a measure of confidence, is that the country is more polarized than it was before. The only difference is that those who like demonstrating in the street are now part of the system, and those who are part of the system previously have now been relegated to them versus us, and that is where the rain has started beating us. The second issue that we need to look at is that the most important thing is national cohesion. The other issues are common issues that can be dealt with through constitutional amendment, and even some of them do not require constitutional amendment. They require just a simple legislation in Parliament. Others are issues of policy, which should actually be implemented by the existing government or the government of the day. And finally, some are socio-economic issues that we need to deal with as a people of Kenya, build that rapport, build that understanding, so that whichever dimension that you belong, whichever political divide that you belong, ultimately you know you are a Kenyan first before you become a member of certain political arrangement or certain community.
All right, over to you, Dr. Churchill Salke. Let me extend the same question. What do you think about the scenario we find ourselves as Kenyans?
Well, thanks, Jesse, and thanks for bringing out this topic. First, we have to admit that in view of the circumstances that led to the creation and the establishment of the handshake, the country was polarized, of course. At that time, there was need for calm in the country. And when the two principals, who were the key contenders in the election in 2017, came in, it was a relief for the country. And the 9-point agenda that formed the basis of the handshake, which among others was inclusivity and reduction in political, the divisive elections and many other things, which was of course expected to be reduced be implemented through the report of the BBI has come up with. I think that it was actually expected that there would have been political divisions. And I think this is something that the starters and the orchestrators of the handshake must have foreseen, and they should have actually prepared for. Because you remember that in every political environment, many of the politicians, and some of them thrive on political divisions. And so there will always have to be political divisions for some politicians to thrive. And I think this therefore forms the basis of how do you ensure that you create a political tool or a political instrument that brings cohesion and sustainable cohesion for the whole country? It requires a lot of political tolerance. It requires a lot of political toning down. It requires a lot of vision among the political leaders. And I think this is one of the things that we currently, is really currently missing. And you know, there's something that Kenyans really expected to have a sustainable create a sustainable peace in the country is also creating fault lines. And I think that for me, when I look at the 9-point agenda, there are certain things that they have been able to achieve. We look at things to do with there is a lot of political will in terms of the fight against corruption. Of course, some people might say that there has been selective justice, but at some aspect of political willingness in the fight against corruption. The key thing that worries me much more, and should worry every politician and every Kenyan, is how the handshake as it is in 2 years down the line is able to reduce division in our elections, and specifically the electoral process. Remember that what brought problems in 2017 was there were people who were not satisfied with the elections. And I think that one of the things that should actually come out of this process of even the report of the Building Bridges initiative is whether every Kenyan is able to get their democratic right whenever they go for an election. And for me, that is much more key, because that is the only way that a country can be able to get sustainable peace and prosperity through legitimization of government.
Okay, proper points, Dr. Churchill Saoke. Over to you, Kipritora Kirwa. Still on the BBI, have the architects of the BBI given electoral injustices and economic growth a wide berth? What do you think?
Well, I think they have been making an attempt. It would be foolhardy for me to start dismissing them before the fine-tuning of the process and validation of the report. But what I can say, as a political practitioner for over 30 years, what is happening is just a simmering of really trouble. We've not been tested through a process of election for us to say that issue was resolved through the BBI process. And what I said fundamentally, politics is supposed to be divisive, because it is about power, appropriation of power, for purposes of gaining access to influencing the way resources are distributed, or being the person partaking in the resource distribution. Therefore, anybody who says BBI has resolved some of those issues either is a fool or does not live in Kenya. And because I don't want to consider others fools, is that there are many Kenyans within the country who don't live in this country. Because we've seen before how things can seem so calm, and towards the end, they precipitate a political disaster, such as the one we saw in 1992, in 1997, and principally in 2007, the post-election violence that we fear that might occur if we do not handle this process. Fundamentally, it is not about the law. It is not about all those nice words that Paul Mwangi was talking about. It is about the leadership. And the leadership of this country was given to one person, the President of the Republic, when he was given the mandate to lead. It needs to bring back all these forces, whether it's the Akeleweke or Tangatanga, into line for purposes of ensuring that we should not lose the main focus, and that is national unity, national integration, and finally, national cohesion.
All right, very key points. It all boils down to leadership. And gentlemen, we'll pick it up from there after we take this short break. Obviously, taking a look at the role the handshake has played in the political landscape as it is right now. Also taking a look at what role the opposition, or lacking of the opposition, might hold come 2022. Do stay with us as we audit the handshake. This is The Big Story.